to start from the beginning again.
Today is Monday, October 30th, 2006, and this is the start of an interview with Mr. Stanley Kokuba at the Macomb Catholic Services located at 15945 Canal Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. Mr. Kokuba is 82 years old, was born December 11th, 1923. He currently resides at 21136 Fraser, St. Clair Shores, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Mr. Paul Wilhelm will be the videographer. Mr. Kokuba, would you state for the record the branch of service for which you served?
I was in the United States Army.
You have an interesting background where you grew up. Can you share some of this with us?
Yes, I was born and raised in West Virginia in a coal mine region, and my dad was a Polish immigrant that came over here from Poland. He made enough of money in Germany and Hamburg working, and he bought a one-way ticket to America. And being he could not read or write, he ended up doing hard manual labor, which they did with the immigrants. They worked in the factories and coal mines and steel mills and forest. So he ended up in Pennsylvania coal mines and later on moved into the West Virginia coal mines. And I was born in a coal company's house in a little town called Shriver, West Virginia. My dad didn't like living and paying rent to the coal mine company for the rent of the house, so he bought an acre of ground up on a hillside and he built his own house. And there I was raised as a young boy, because I was only about a year old. And then I had two other sisters that was born in that house. The house still stands in that little town called Jerry, West Virginia. And up through this holler, Scotch Run holler, it was about 10 miles out of the city of Morgantown, which is where the West Virginia University is. I went to grade school in Jerry, and I went to junior high school in Osage, West Virginia, and I went to high school in Morgantown, University High School, Royal High School. And then my dad made me quit high school before I had one more year to go, and I didn't want to go into coal mines. I was scared. I seen so many deaths coming out of there. I went at night school, and I trained to be a welder from midnight till 8 o'clock in the morning. They had a school bus that took us to the training place, and we learned to be welders, and they needed a lot of them in the shipyards. And I and another boy, buddy of mine, was sent to Hartford, Connecticut, and we went into the shipyards in Groton, Connecticut, where they built the submarines. And we were trainees there. And I ended up in the steel mills where my brother worked. And the ends I was working in the defense plant, producing steel. They didn't bother me for 6 or 8 months. So I didn't go into the Army till I was 19 and a half. Probably working in the defense plant kept me out of the Army for 6 to 8 months.
It's doing it again, eh?
Yeah.
Holy Moses.
Is the tape moving?
Yeah. It's not the tape. At least I wouldn't think so.
That'd be the TV, huh?
It's the camera, I believe. Mr. Kokuba, I'm sorry. You know, we've got two options here as far as I see it. We can continue with this, and it's going to be just a pretty nasty picture. Now it's straightened out again. Or we can reschedule it when you come back from Florida.
When are you leaving?
Another week.
Now it's great. I've never seen this problem before. I mean, we're recording now and everything is fine.
It's straightened out?
Yeah, it's straightened out. Yeah, I mean, we can continue trying it, and you know, just take up from where you were.
Okay. Let's try it.
Yeah.
If we can resolve the problem, if it continues, is there a way we could resolve it and get back before he leaves?
I don't know.
I mean, that's an option, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your schedule like?
It's going to be pretty tight.
Okay, so maybe the other option then might be.
Well, why don't, I mean, it looks good now. Why don't we just keep going?
Okay. All right, you can pick up where you were in Groton,
Oh,
Connecticut, where you were doing the,
So I worked in the steel mills, and they left me the draft board probably figured I was helping produce steel for the war effort, so they didn't bother me for about 6 or 8 months. So I didn't go into the Army until I was 19 and a half, which I should have been in at least when I was 18 and a half or 19. And,
do you recall when you got in the Army what your experiences were with the boot camp?
oh yes, I was drafted and went to, on June the 1st, we left West Virginia on buses, and we ended up in Fort Hays, Columbus, Ohio, and that's where they took our civilian clothes away from us and fitted us up with Army clothes, and then they shipped us on a train which went for 2 days or 2 nights or 3 nights, and we didn't know where we were going until we got into Georgia, and I happened to see a city in Georgia, and I said, oh well, we're either going to train in Georgia or Florida, and we did. We trained in Camp Stewart, Georgia, outside of Savannah.
And how was boot camp? Do you recall that?
Yeah, it was hot there. It was in June, July, and August and September, the hottest part of the year down in South. And we had 90 and 100-degree weather and very hot. The training was very fast and hard. We did a lot of walking, a lot of training. We had to walk to our firing range, which was about 5 miles away every morning, to fire our guns, and also to the rifle range. Every morning we got up and we had to take exercise for at least 1 hour, and then we had our breakfast, and like I said, back into the training, out to the firing ranges. And then we took forced marches in part of our training. We marched 10 miles without stopping in a hot weather, and a lot of the fellas got sick and had heat exhaustion, and they would put them back in the trucks and haul them back to the medics.
During this boot camp, the war was on. What were you people thinking of about where you would end up? And
yes, we did. We were always thinking about what theater would wish we were sent to. We dread being sent to the Pacific because we read and heard so much about the malaria and the island fighting, and the Japanese fought to the last man. They would never surrender, and it was a much tougher fighting, and we didn't want to go to the Pacific. And after we trained in Camp Stewart, Georgia, all summer long until about November, they shipped us to the Tennessee maneuvers in Tennessee, Tullahoma, Tennessee, near Nashville. And it was winter, and it was cold, snow, and wet rain. And we did first winter maneuvers in Tennessee. And from the maneuvers, we went to Fort Fisher, North Carolina. It was Fort Fisher was a Civil War battlefield. It's a peninsula sticking out in the Atlantic Ocean, and it protected Wilmington in the Civil War. And they made a training ground. It's still a historic spot.
did you have a choice of what theater you would end up in, or was
No.
that decided for you?
No, we had no choice. We didn't know where we were going, and they wouldn't tell you nothing.
So you feel very lucky about going into the European theater, right?
Yes, after we trained in Fort Fisher, we went to Camp Buckner, which was a holding place until we were ready to be shipped to a port of embarkation. And after our firing the targets at Fort Fisher with our guns, we went to Camp Buckner, and there was 10 guys chosen out of 200, and they received a good conduct medal, and I was one out of 10 that got our first good conduct Army medal. Then we took a train from Camp Buckner, and we traveled 2 or 3 days and nights, and we didn't know where we were going, but we're going up to the East Coast, and finally I could see that we were in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, in Delaware, and I said, well, we're on the East Coast. We're probably going to go to the European theater. We ended up in Camp Mount Standish near Boston, Massachusetts. And there we were in a holding area waiting for a ship to go to Europe. And in the meanwhile, we got passes and we went. I had a sister in New York, so I used to go visit her. And I told her, the Saturday I don't come down to see you will be the day that we're shipped out. Finally, after 2 or 3 weeks there, we finally got a ship, and we went in a convoy across the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, the German submarines chased us all over, and we zigzagged. And we had the destroyers chasing the German submarines. And finally, we got into England. In Swansea, Wales, we landed. And then they shipped us up to Leek, England, until our guns and our equipment all came over. And then we put our guns around Cardiff, Wales, at the Bristol Bay. It was a big seaport, and the Germans would come over at night and try to bomb these seaports. Well, we didn't do much shooting because they were out of range, and it was night. So then the invasion took place, and we were shipped to Southampton, Bournemouth, and there we greased our guns all up and got them prepared to go across the English Channel.
Were you ever able to use your welding experience during all of this?
No, I didn't. I never was a certified welder, but I had more training to do, and that's where it ended up until the war was over, and then I went into training here under the GI Bill, and I used the welding then.
At what time now in period did you end up arriving over in the European theater? When was that?
We got over there in April, yeah. 1944.
1944.
And the invasion was June 6th of 44. Well, you know, it's about a year. We went into the Army. We started our training in Camp Stewart, Georgia, in June of 1943, and in July of 44, we landed on the beaches on Utah Beach. Only about years of training, and we were soldiers already.
Now, you weren't in the original landing.
No, we weren't in the original invasion. That was infantry, mostly infantry and rangers and commandos, specialized troops. They didn't need us till about a month after the invasion. We landed in July. And then that's when we were in anti-aircraft artillery, so we protected the first airstrip on Utah Beach. And
so that's the beach you landed on?
Yes, we landed on Utah Beach.
I suspect it was all secure at that time?
Oh yes, it was secure. The front lines wasn't too far away, about 9 or 10 miles down the road. They did not have St. Lo captured yet. They were fighting to get through St. Lo.
Do you remember any of the people, your fellow troops that you were with?
Oh yes, I still have a few that are buddies. We were having an Army reunion for about almost 20 years. So a lot of us guys got together every year, and we went to different cities throughout the United States, and we would have a very nice Army reunion. And to this day, I have 2 close buddies that are still living, and I communicate with them. One I see in Florida every winter. The other one lives near Philadelphia, when we had our last reunion in Philadelphia, I got to see him, and I communicate with him.
You landed on Utah, and I think what you said is you had detail right there on the Utah beach,
Yes.
but you moved through a number of different cities.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about the duty on Utah and then how you found yourself moving through all of the different...
When we landed on Utah Beach, we had 3 days of K rations in our backpacks. We had 1 canister of water, and that's all. And where we landed, I have a pretty good idea today where we landed. It was a wooded area, and we put up our pup tents there, 2 men to the pup tent, and about the second day, we had no more water. Everybody drank their canister of water, which is about a quart of water. And our rations were about gone, so I went up to my sergeant. I says, "Don't you have any water for us?" He says, "No." And I says, "You have a shovel?" He says, "No." "What do you want a shovel for?" I said, "I start digging right here. If I dig deep enough, I'm going to find water." He said, "Well, I don't." I said, "You got an empty can?" He said, "Yeah." So he had an empty 5-gallon water can. And I says, "Can I have that water can?" And I says, "Give me permission to start walking down this road, and I'm going to go look for water." He says, "Yeah." So he gave me the water can. I said, "Well, get another soldier to go with me." None of my buddies, nobody would go with me. Everybody was scared. So I just put my rifle on my shoulder, and down that dirt road I went, and I think I was heading towards St. Mary Eglise on that road. And I walked at least a mile or so down that road, along these hedgerows, and I came across a dead paratrooper along the road. He was partially covered with some dirt, and I finally found a little French house, a farmhouse. It was like a barn, like a clapperboard, and I knocked on the door, and a little girl about 5 years old came to the door, and I shook the water can, and I says, "De l'eau," and de l'eau means water in French. So she pointed over there, and about 50 feet away there was a hand pump. So I went over to the hand pump, and I pumped, and I got some good fresh cold water, filled the can up in my canister, and I headed back up to the road. And I finally got there, and everybody got their share of water. Next day, I went back again by myself again, and by this time there was only one vehicle that passed me up the first day, a Jeep with a driver and an officer. And I think they've seen this dead paratrooper along the road, and the next day it was gone. They must have picked him up. And then finally they found us. We were sort of lost, I assume, because nobody knew where we were. Finally found us, and we got some water and some more rations.
So how long were you assigned on the Utah beach?
Oh, well, we were there for a few weeks on this airstrip. Yeah, the end of July and part of August. And then they broke through St. Lo, the big bombing of St. Lo. The sky was black with bombers, and they leveled that little town of St. Lo, and that's where our armed forces broke through. I got a picture there showing where they had to bulldoze the street to get our armed tanks and our jeeps and our troops through. They made a spearhead, and they captured Cherbourg, the first seaport. They needed a seaport real bad, because everything had to be landed on the beaches. Every piece of supply, all the food, all the ammunition, and all the troops. So they finally captured Cherbourg, and they shipped our outfit up to Cherbourg, and we protected the seaport of Cherbourg for a few weeks.
Then when did you begin your trek across France?
That after they captured Cherbourg, and Patton broke through, and we spearheaded armies east, north, and south there, and they brought us back down from Cherbourg, and we traveled with Patton's army, and we went into all kinds of different towns. Every week we were moving, and they covered a lot of ground, and a lot of little towns like we was in the town of Commercy and Bar-le-Duc and Verdun. We was in Verdun for quite a while, and I didn't find out what our guns were up on top of this hill in Verdun. It was a big battleground in World War I. Monuments up there galore. There's a monument for the pigeons and generals. They had these concrete revetments, where the soldiers and the medics were, and the pigeons. We slept in those things that were built in World War I. I didn't find out for 50 years later what we were protecting there, the city of Verdun, but I ran across a soldier and he said that was Patton's headquarters. So we must have been a pretty good outfit, because they used our anti-aircraft unit in all critical places, like the airstrips in Cherbourg, in Verdun, Commercy, Bar-le-Duc, and Toul. Toul was a big airstrip, was right close up to the front lines, and that's during the winter, the coldest winter they had in France for 50 years. That was during the Battle of Bulge. We were just south of that. I seen Patton's army go right up the road past our gun position. He moved his whole army up there, or divisions, to relieve the Battle of the Bulge.
How did they move this anti-aircraft machinery?
Okay, we were what you call a we didn't have no trucks or equipment. We had headquarters, and when we moved, they brought trucks and loaded up all tents and all of our equipment, and hooked our guns up and hauled it to the next location, which could be anywhere from 20 to 30 or 50 miles away. And we dug in. Half the time we did not know what we were protecting. They wouldn't tell you. We protected ammunition dumps, gasoline dumps, railroad centers, bridges, and headquarters. So many times we didn't know what we were protecting.
Did you ever meet Patton?
No, I never got.
What'd you think about him?
I thought he was the greatest general there ever was. He shortened that war in Europe by one whole year by his blitzkrieg that he learned from the Germans, I guess. And he helped whip Rommel in Africa, and he did the same thing in France. Rommel was in charge of all France's German defenses. He was building all the big fortifications along the beaches in Normandy. There was 5 beaches in Normandy, you know, British, Canadians, and Americans, and even the French. There was Utah Beach and Omaha Beach was the 2 American beaches. Gold, Sword, and Juno were the English and the Canadians and the French beaches. So the war could have gone a lot longer if it wasn't for General Patton.
Now you're getting through France and you went as far as Germany. Do you remember the experiences when you got into Germany?
Yes. The one thing that I wrote my pamphlet there called My Memories. One place I remember in Germany very well is the Rhine River. There's a little town south on the Rhine River that's called Oppenheim. And General Patton was the first to get troops across the Rhine River at that little town. It wasn't heavily guarded, and he took his troops over by rowboats. He got a company of troops over there, and then he brought his engineers in, and they built a pontoon bridge, and then he got some of his heavier equipment over there, jeeps and tanks, and an armored division. And then the engineers came in, and they were building a big wooden structure, big wooden bridge. And our guns were right on the cliffs of the Rhine River, and I could look right down, and I could see those bridges, the pontoon bridge, and the one that was bombed, and also the wooden structure being built. They were going to name that bridge the Patton Bridge, but Roosevelt died April 12th, 1945, and they named it the Roosevelt Bridge. And this Rhine River, we were on these big cliffs, like a couple 100 feet up, and they were on a level land up there, and it was all vineyards. So we had our gun dug right on the tip of this cliff in the vineyards. Underneath or down below was a big winery, and they made all that Rhine wine. And we found a cellar underneath this cliff right where my gun was sitting over top of it. A couple of my buddies came up to me and said, "Boy, we found a wine cellar, no big barrels full of wine. But what are we going to do?" I said, "Gather up some water cans," and I said, "Get a couple of feet of telephone cable." And I said, "I'll throw the cable over. You guys go down and get the wine and tie it onto the cable and jerk it, and I'll bring the wine up. So I hauled up five 5-gallon cans. That's 25 gallons of wine, and we all had our good time. And next day, the sergeant was coming around. I guess it was reported, and he's looking who's got the wine, and we buried it and drank it all up. You know, otherwise, we'd have got court-martialed. Do you know, 50 years later, I was in a little cafe down in Punta Gorda, Fisherman's Wharf, having a coffee in a little coffee shop with me and my daughter and my sister-in-law, and there was two ladies sitting at the next little tiny table next to us, and I heard them talking, and I told her, I said, you know, they sound like they're talking German. I bet you those two ladies are from Germany. So I reached over and I says, where are you ladies from anyway? Oh, we're from Germany. And I says, yeah? I says, I was over there. It's a beautiful country. And where was you in Germany? I says, a little town called Oppenheim. I says, that's where they made their Rhine wine. And that's where Patriotic crossed the river Rhine. And I says, my buddies went down, and the only way to get that wine was shoot a hole in the barrel and put the 5-gallon cans under it and fill them all up. And I says, I pulled them up by a cable. And I says, the rest of it ran on the ground. So she says, that was you who did that. That winery was my cousin's. What a small world.
Now, what kind of anti-aircraft did you operate?
Okay, we had two types of anti-aircraft guns. The large gun was a 40-millimeter anti-aircraft gun with a long barrel on wheels. It could be pulled and then dug in. We had to dig them in every time and put sandbags around them, even if you got there at midnight before you put your tent up. The other one is a quad 50 calibers, had 4 50 caliber machine guns, 2 on each side, and it ran by a generator. And the corporal would sit down in a cage and would point these guns and fire them. And I and another guy would sit on each side of the 50 calibers, and we would put the loaded canisters of 50 caliber machine gun shells on a belt when they ran out. So I was on both of them.
Did you ever see any Germans while you went through these different towns?
No. When we were going, when we moved off the Utah beach and we moved up to Cherbourg, when we were getting into Cherbourg with our guns to put the protected port of Cherbourg, while we were going in, the German prisoners were marching out with their hands above their heads, tied above their heads, and they were marching out while we were going in. That's the only time I've seen a lot of prisoners, and also when we were coming home at a prison camp where the Germans were, but the war was over. But along the road, no, I didn't get to see no Germans. The French people were nice to us and treated us real good. Can't complain there.
What were the German people like?
When we were in Germany, after we got there, we were not allowed to talk to them. They had a non-fraternization law, came through by headquarters from Eisenhower. We were not allowed to talk or associate with the German people. So that was it. If you got caught, you could get court-martialed.
Now, you were in the service, you indicated to me earlier, you didn't check out until 1946.
Yes.
What happened in the interim after the war? And
oh, after the war, after we left the Rhine River, we moved in with Patton's army. He got to the Czech border. That's south of Germany, where Munich and Nuremberg are. We ended up in a big airfield, big, huge German airfield with big buildings and hangars that Patton's army had captured. They brought our anti-aircraft guns, and naturally we protected this field. Well, it wasn't very long. We got there in the early part of May, and May the 8th, the Germans surrendered. And there was a little town called Illesheim, Germany. It was nothing but a big German Air Force base. And I would say it was 30 miles or 40 miles west of Nuremberg. After the war was over, we got orders from Eisenhower's headquarters. There was a lot of young fellas that didn't finish high school, and I was one of them. Orders came that anybody that didn't finish high school or wanted to further their education, they started schools. They sent guys to Paris, the special training. The government brought books in and everything. And I volunteered to go there, and I took up a blueprint reading course, a drafting course, and an English course. And we got credit for that. And that's how I got my high school education. When I come back home from the service, I went back to Morgantown to the high school, took all my papers there, and I had good grades. And the principal said I was short of 1 credit in American history, and I was good in American history even to this day. So they gave me that book and says, go back to Detroit and read it. When you're done, I'll send you a test. And I wrote the test all out, and he sent me my high school diploma. That's how I got it the hard way.
Now, you were obviously gone from home a long time.
Yes, almost 2 years.
2 years. Any thoughts about how you felt? You weren't married when you went over?
No, my mother was my sweetheart. I carried her on my dog tags with a cross. And a couple times almost got killed. In Cherbourg, a big ammunition dump blew up right in our faces. And it wasn't for underground tunnels that we got into. This ammunition dump was all German captured bombs and artillery shells. And we don't know whether it was sabotage or what. It blew ships up in the English Channel and caused a lot of damage. And quite a few guys got killed. But we escaped it. We ran up to this command post and stayed over there a night or and a day, and the next day we went back to our gun positions. That's one time we could have got killed.
What were your services as anti-aircraft required after the war was over?
No, we just lined up our guns in Germany in a field. We had to clean them and grease them every day and polish them up, and that was to keep us out of mischief. And then they started at school, so I went to school in the morning till afternoon. And a lot of guys just gambled all day and just laid around. The war was over, and we're waiting for our next trip, which would be coming home. And you had to wait. Everybody was shipped home according to how many points you had. You got so many points of being in the Army, in the USA, so many points for being overseas, and so many points for every battle that you was in. Our outfit was in 4 campaigns in Normandy, northern France, the Rhineland, and Germany. There's 4 little bronze stars on your ribbon, and your European theater ribbon. And you got so many points for that. Now I think we ended up with 70 points. And soon, well, we were there from May until December, because we were shipped up to Le Havre from Nuremberg by train, and that's when we got on a ship in Le Havre and came across. And we didn't think we'd ever going to make it. We thought we were going to all sink and drown in the Atlantic Ocean. We hit the worst North Sea, terrible, terrible storms. The waves were 30 feet high. Our boat was moving 5 miles an hour, almost like a cork out there. For 3 days and 3 nights, nobody could get on top deck. Everybody had to be down under deck. The hatches were all closed. Damage was done on our ship. Our water system was damaged. We're lucky we got home.
Now, was your mom still alive when you got home?
Yes, my mom was alive.
I bet she was glad to see you.
Yes, my mom and my sisters all left West Virginia to come to Detroit to work in the war factories. My dad stayed back in the coal mines. He just loved them, I guess. And they came up here. And once they got used to living in the city, where they had indoor toilet and shower and tub, hot water, and central heat, they weren't about to go back there where there was an outhouse, no hot water, and only a cold water faucet. So they told my dad they're not going back, so they forced him into selling that house on the hillside in Jerry, West Virginia, while I was in France. So when I got discharged in January of 1946, I came home to a new home, and I settled in Detroit. And I lived in Detroit more in Michigan than anywhere else.
Where did you go to work?
Oh, my uncle was a plumber, and he got his master's plumber's license from the state of Michigan. He had to take a state examination, and he decided he wanted to go on his own. He wanted to go in his own business instead of working for somebody else. So my mother got wind of it, so my mother says to her brother, well, when Stanley comes home, why don't you take him in and teach him how to be a plumber? Well, I did. I got home, and my mother's asked my uncle, and my uncle says, your mom wants me to make a plumber out of you. And I didn't even know what a wrench was or a piece of pipe, because back home where I was raised, we had no wrenches, we had no pipes, we had an outhouse. So anyway, he said, well, I'll take you in for a couple of weeks, and he says, you might like it, you might not. Well, I took to it real good. So then I signed up under GI Bill, and the government paid for all my schooling, bought me all my tools. So I did. I got my education, and I become a plumber under the GI Bill. I went to Local 98. That's our local union here, our big plumbers union. And they had a school, and I went 4 years to that school. They gave me 1 year credit for being in the Army. And I become a plumber. I've been a plumber all my life. I'm a retired plumber.
Are you a master plumber?
I got my master's license also from the state, but I never used them. Master license is allows you to go in business. Journeyman allows you to work for a master plumber. You have to pass 2 state examinations for that.
Can you tell us whether the experiences you had in the war had any influence on your life after that? In your work life or your personal life?
Yes, you know, I adapted to the Army life pretty easily. I was born and raised under a Polish family, you know, and they were pretty strict with their children. We were disciplined. So Army discipline didn't bother me one iota. I took right with it. And I was a good soldier. Maybe that's why I was one of the 10 to get the Good Conduct Medal right at the beginning, before we went overseas. So, and I'm a very disciplined guy to this day. And I'm a very patriotic man to this day. I fly the flag every day. And I have a place in Florida, and I have a cottage. And as soon as I get there, I put my flag up. I'm in all the St. Clair Shores parades. I'm a member of Post 1146, Bruce Post, Veterans of Foreign Wars in St. Clair Shores, the largest post in Michigan, one of number 3, I guess, in the nation. So I enjoy that to this day.
You've got some medals. You need to tell us about these medals you've got.
Okay. This one here, after the war was over, the people from Normandy, which they are the children and the farmers, they all put in their nickels and dimes, and they thought that any soldier that landed on one of the beaches in Normandy is entitled to this medal that they produced. And I sent my discharge papers over there, and it tells you right on it that we landed in Normandy, and we was in the Battle of Normandy in northern France, and all the way to Germany. So they sent me that medal. They finally ran out of it. This one here, I just got in July. This was pinned on me by the mayor of St. Mary Glisse, the little town, first town they liberated in France by the paratroopers. They idolized the paratroopers there to this day. A paratrooper and I and the mayor, we laid a wreath at the monument in St. Mary Glisse, and then they gave us a champagne party. So this one is the 60th anniversary of Normandy. This is the 2004 medal. Every 10 years, I think they put out a medal, the 25th and the 50th, and this is the 60th. So I just got this one. This ribbon here is a European theater. It's got 4 little brown stars. That means there's...
That's the one you referred to earlier. 4
battle campaigns in Europe. Good Conduct Medal. And this is American Theater. And this is the World War II Victory Medal, and that's German Occupation Medal. These are the ribbons that go with the medals. The medals are in my case here, in case you want to see them.
I'm sure you're very proud of those.
Oh yeah.
Medals.
And this one here, the guy on Utah Beach, the guy that runs the museum gave me this one because I proved to him that our outfit landed on Utah Beach. And this is some sand that I brought back from Utah Beach. I was over there in July of 2006, 62 years after the invasion. I was fortunate enough to go back and visit him.
Now you got to tell us a little bit about your recent visit. I'm really interested in that.
Oh, well, all right. We had a 12-day trip. 1 day flying to Paris and 1 day flying back home from Germany. When we got to Paris, we got on a big tour buses. There was 2 of them waiting for us. There was 105 tourists. Each bus load took 50 or 51 passengers. We had guides on there, people that knew France. We picked up 2 guides, a husband and wife in Paris, and they told us all on our journey. We got on these buses in the morning and we traveled all day, and we got up to Normandy in that evening in a big, beautiful hotel right on the beaches up there in the little town. And then we had our supper there and our breakfast next morning. And then we all got back on these buses and we made a tour of all the beaches. Juno Beach and Sword Beach and Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. And we ended up in St. Mary's where the mayor met us. And 12 of us out of the group received this medal in the city hall.
Was Utah Beach as you recalled it?
Well, they claim that the museum is built right where there was a big German gun emplacement.